to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings and welcome back to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you. Of course, I'm always excited to see everybody out there today. And today I have a really fun conversation that I had with Jimmy Waldo of Alcatrazz. For those of you that may have forgotten or didn't know, Alcatrazz is a band that has been around for the better part of 40 years. Yngwie Malmsteen played in the band. Steve Vai at one point played in the band. And they have had a great run of recent records that I think are absolutely outstanding. They have a new album coming out November 7th, 2025. And of course, they are working on another studio album to come out in 2026. But Jimmy has played on a lot of really great projects. Aside from Alcatrazz, he's done work on the newest A to Z album, A to Z 2. He played on the newest Warlord album. Jimmy played on a very interesting album by Quiet Riot, which is something that we do talk about. And he's played on a lot of really great projects over the years, way too many for me to name in this little short segment. So with that said, here is the interview with myself and Jimmy Waldo. It was an incredible conversation. Enjoy. Welcome back, everybody, to the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you, and of course, I am joined by somebody who has played in a lot of great bands, more bands than I can count, but every one of those projects, in my opinion, has always been a very high quality album that he's participated on. That would be Mr. Jimmy Waldo from Alcatrazz. And of course, we have a new Alcatrazz album coming out very soon, and I am welcome you to the show, talking to you for the first time, and I'm really excited for this interview, actually, because you've played on so many albums that I absolutely love.
Oh, wow. That's a huge compliment. Mm-hmm. As you know, as opposed to, you hear some people talk about, I talked to so-and-so, he was on that crappy album that it was not the keyboard player's fault, but, maybe just a bad situation where he worked for somebody bad, but a lot of bad records. I've been very fortunate. And through no fault of my own, I just kind of stumbled into these things, and met people and stuff, and it just worked out.
Right. Absolutely. So we'll talk about some of those projects, but let's get into the upcoming Alcatrazz album, because that's definitely what we have coming out. You have some re-recordings on that. You have a new singer, and definitely tell everybody about that record. I know when I talked to Giles, he said it was kind of like, instead of recording a live record, why don't we just do studio tracks? That was one of the things he mentioned. But, talk about that record, and which comes out, I believe, November 7th.
Yes.
I could be wrong. Yeah. So yes. Let's talk about that record and why you decided to go that route.
Well, we had been playing with Giles. I mean, actually, I'd worked with Giles years ago. He was managing the Graham Bonnet Band. Mm-hmm. And I was playing keyboard. He got me involved in the Graham Bonnet Band.
Sure.
And so Giles was on the road with us, and Graham didn't do sound checks, or about one sound check out of 30. So Giles would sing the sound checks, and we were doing some Alcatrazz songs at the time, and and Giles would just sing his ass off. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, wow, this guy, he hits the notes, that he could kill this stuff. Mm-hmm. And this went on for a couple of years. And then we finally made the move. After Doogie left and everything, we made a move. Giles was the obvious choice. And there was a big U.S. tour coming up. So we'd already played in Europe with Giles. We've done about 100 shows with Giles. And we just thought, this is crazy. We got to get him on a recording. And then we thought, well, to introduce him to people, the best thing to do would put him on traditional Alcatrazz stuff that he'd been singing anyway on the road. And that'll get him in perspective with fans. They can relate to, he's doing Island in the Sun or Hiroshima Mon Amour. People can relate to those songs and, that's Giles. Oh, that's cool. So that's what started it. We just wanted to get him introduced to people. Because he's the guy, and I love him as a friend, but he's just killing the stuff as a singer. I mean, live, he's the most consistent singer I've ever worked with.
Okay.
That I've ever toured with. Pitch, attitude, show, whatever. He's just bam. Walks on stage, having a bad day on the road, no sleep, but the minute he walks on stage, it's on. You know? And that's the way Joe Stump is, and that's the way I am. I try to, bring it no matter what. This is the deal. So Giles, great. We just want to introduce him to people.
Yeah.
We picked those songs to do it with, and a couple songs off, some past records, and then we have one new song on there that Giles wrote. I jumped in on a few things, but Joe and I, but Giles basically wrote that. So yeah, introduction.
Now you're working on another actual studio album,
yes,
as well, and
yes.
I think this is more, and it's interesting you say it's a good introduction because I think it is. I think that when I heard the Island in the Sun single, for example, I thought he fit really, really well on that track. And in listening to other, previous people obviously singing that track,
right.
This like from a live perspective or even the original version of it, I thought he did a really good job on it. And, unfortunately, it seems like the reaction was mostly positive. Usually you get a lot of backlash for that.
Yeah.
And it looked like, most people seemed to really like his version of it.
It did. The people I talked to, and I've got some friends that are pretty brutal. They've never held back. And some of those, actually, I've got some friends that don't even like Alcatrazz.
Okay.
That's not their favorite band. They don't dislike it, but, and we've been friends for years, musicians and non-musicians. And they said, wow, whoever that guy is, that sounds like Alcatrazz. And that was a huge compliment to Giles and to me, that we got a guy that it sounds like Alcatrazz. It doesn't sound like, well, yeah, you and Joe are playing like Alcatrazz, but the singer sounds like he belongs in Foreigner.
Sure.
We didn't want a Foreigner guy,
Yeah.
And I love Foreigner, but that's not the style we do. So yeah, it's been interesting, but it's been great. And Doogie was great. And I love Doogie. Great guy, but he had sung some of the Alcatrazz stuff in Yngwie's band.
Okay. Yeah.
When he was with Yngwie. So he was burnt out. Some of these songs he just didn't want anything to do with.
Yeah.
Because he'd sung them so much.
Yeah.
So Doogie, he was like fighting it. He didn't, whereas Giles grew up on this stuff. So Giles couldn't wait. Giles would sing everything. We'd be doing the whole record if it made sense, but that doesn't make sense. So,
right.
But yeah, and that, for me, that's what I wanted. I want somebody that's going to jump in there. There's no money. It's not like we're paying somebody a lot of money. So I wanted somebody that was going to have their heart into it. And the personality thing, and that's so important. And people, I know guys in bands are always looking for the hottest musicians in town or in the world. And they think, oh, we get those guys and this guy and the super group thing. Oh man, then that's going to do it. And that's not where it's at, because the fans, yourself, whatever, you're not listening to, you don't really care who's in the band. You appreciate the playing maybe, but to you, I'm sure it's more important, the songs and the vocals.
Yeah.
That to me is the most important thing when I hear a new band. And so I say, oh, you got to check these guys out. The first thing I just gravitate towards, okay, what's the singer like? And the songs. And it doesn't matter how heavy it is. It could be death metal, but if it's got a thing, and it's got, there are good songs in that genre, then I'm in, but Giles really brings it. I mean, he's part of this. It's like he's been there all along, put it that way.
Yeah.
He'd sing at sound check, and my God, the guy just walks up to the mic and we go, well, we got about 10 minutes, but we got to get a level on Graham's in-ears and whatever. Giles would just go, play a song. So, well, let's do Jet to Jet. And okay, bam, he's singing the crap out of it and we'd be done.
Yeah, I think it's more important. I think too many times with many bands out there, and I've been, doing this show for the better part of 27 years, is that when you have musicians, when you're looking to pick people in, bring them into the band, I don't think it's as much of a problem now. But, let's say 15, 20 years ago, they would look to bring, some of the more well-known names out there instead of bringing the right people in there.
That's right.
And what it would do is you'd bring this in, you get these really high expectations. The chemistry isn't there. And then you put this record out and it bombs, essentially. Yeah. And I think that I think most people now, especially more veteran bands, have learned from that and
Yes.
have, instead of going after a brand name, they pick, okay, who's the best fit? Who's the best
Yes.
fit from a personality perspective? Who's
That's
the best
it.
fit musically? And I think now you are seeing a lot of these more unknown musicians in some of these bands that have been around 30, 40 years, and it's
Yes.
made a huge difference.
And that's why, because when they met the big band, and the famous band met them, it was like, this guy's cool. He delivers the goods.
Yeah.
He can sing or play this stuff like we want it, like we want it to feel a certain way.
Yep.
And he does it. So, and he's a great guy. And he's got no past of, he's been to rehab 5 times and all that stuff, and I was done. I really wanted somebody that we could get along with, because Joe Stump and I get along so good. And he's such a cool guy, such a pro.
And he's been in the
great.
band the longest out of any guitar player.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he'll always be here, because I love working with Joe, and I love what he does as a musician, but as a person, we get along great. And that's so important to me. Oh my God. So Giles is that way. Giles and I are friends. We were friends the first time we met in the Graham Bonnet band. Giles called me I didn't know him, and he says, hey, I'm managing Graham Bonnet, and I know you haven't talked to Graham in a long time, and would you be into playing on his record? And I said, well, sure. I didn't ask about money. I was just like, hey, this will be cool. I get back together with Graham, play on it. And we did, and that just sort of morphed into, okay, now I'm going to tour with him, and Giles was the manager.
Sure.
So it was a very natural progression to getting to be friends. And it's kind of cool because we got to be friends. He wasn't in the band. We weren't in a band together.
Yeah.
I saw him at his worst, where he's under fire. And I saw him go through all that, how he handles personalities and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I had an unusual, I don't know what you would call it, but most guys, when you get a guy in the band, you don't get to see that part of them. You meet somebody and maybe you know them for a few months, and then you like them, and they play their ass off or sing their ass off, and you go, okay, great, that's the guy. And Giles, I got to know really well. We hung out, and it was good.
So the next record, the album that you're writing, the next album that's coming out, how has that progressed? Now that you have a pretty solid lineup right now?
It's progressed really pretty quickly. If we weren't touring and doing stuff, it would be almost done, but we've been busy, and Giles and I do the Warlord thing. So we've done some tours, and that's kind of gotten in the way of the Alcatrazz stuff, but
sure.
But it's progressing great. I'm going to Boston on Thursday or Friday to work with Joe, but we got too many songs already.
Yeah,
we're going to pick from. So we're in good shape for having songs. We're really happy with them, and then we're going to put those together. Then Giles is coming to my house in Chicago on the 28th for 5 days, and then we're going to work on stuff that we got from Joe and stuff that he and I have been writing. We're going to finish it off. He's going to do some vocals here. And then we go to Sweden to tour a week later. So we're on a roll kind of thing. And then in Sweden, we'll be rehearsing for 2 days. So we're probably going to cut some guitars at rehearsals. Joe on some stuff, on a few things. So we're always just chewing away at it, yeah.
So you mentioned Warlord, which was interesting because the album, I remember before the newest Warlord album, Free Spirit's Story, came out, everyone was pissed off. There's no Bill Samus.
Yeah.
And then the album came out and everybody completely changed their tune. And what was it like being a part of that album? And playing with, because you played with Mark Zonder in that band, and the album actually, that album did really well, but it seems like the tour has gone well.
Everything about it has gone well, and it's not that I was surprised. It's just these days I've done enough of this stuff and toured enough, and that you don't always, it's not like you get all, oh man, this is going to kill, we're going to take over the world, and that used to be the attitude. Oh, we're going to make it, this is going to be a number one, whatever. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect anything out of Warlord other than I really like the people in the band. Eric and Diego, the guitar players, are just the coolest guys and some of the best musicians I've ever played with. Philip Bino, well, it doesn't get better than that as a bass player, and is a great, and as a person. And Zonder, I had done a Graham Bonnet record with Mark. So I'd done a couple of records with Mark actually before that. So I knew him, and he's great, easygoing and fun to be with. And Giles singing. So for me, it was like, okay. And doing that record, I played Bill Samus's parts. That he did all the keyboards, and I just copped his parts, and I came as to honor him, and I thought that was the right thing to do. Play them as close as possible to his feel. And Bill's got an interesting feel. It's not just straight up. He does things that, as a keyboard player, that's not what I would do. I would not play them exactly the same way, but I played them the way he played them off the demos. And that was fun for me. It was a real challenge, and it took me a lot longer to do that than it would normally do to keyboards, but it was fun. And I didn't have any big expectations. I was just kind of having fun. I like working with the people, and all the playing on it was great and all that. And the label seemed to be real excited about it. So I thought, hey, great. And then Giles said, well, we're going to tour. And I thought, cool. So, and then the first gigs we did were just like, wow, holy cow. These people, they knew every lyric. We played festivals, we played little clubs. Everybody knows every lyric. They know everything about the band. So that part of it is a lot of fun. It's great.
Speaking of Mark Zonder, he said you were like one of the unsung heroes of the newest A to Z album.
Oh.
And it was just the style. And I agreed with him on that, because when I reviewed that record, one of the things that I thought was interesting about it in your role on the album is that your keyboard parts had this kind of aggression to them, that really sort of set that album off. Because, if you want to talk about an album with like an all-star cast of musicians, I mean, it's that record. And I have to ask, man, your approach on that album was great. And talk a bit about recording that, because I'll be honest with you, it's probably one of my favorite albums of the year.
Wow. That's a huge compliment. Mark and I are friends and been friends for a while. So Mark was the producer, and Mark brought me in on that and said, I want you to play keyboards on this. And I said, okay.
Right.
And I said, and he and I were talking like 3 times a day, because he has ideas. And Mark is he doesn't play keyboards or guitar, but Mark is really good at explaining the feel that he wants, the vibe,
sure.
And so he would just say, man, do B3. I want Hammond. We got to do some Hammond stuff. But I wasn't expecting that. I thought, oh, well, okay. Because I love playing Hammond, obviously, and my B3's sitting there, my Leslie's right behind me. So I was like, okay, cool. And the first stuff I did, I was using the Leslie, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Leslie, what it does, but
so I own a B3.
Okay, well,
tighten up the strap and the speaker.
Okay,
get the distortion.
Okay. Yeah, so I was using my Leslie, and I have a whole bunch of amps I use. I customized it myself, and I have my own switch box and crap. My favorite amp for that is my Fender Champ, my 60s Fender Champ.
Okay.
The B3 into that, no pedals, nothing. I crank that. I just put everything on 10, and it just screams. And I have a soundproof box that it's in. And if you open that door, it's like a jet taking off with that silly little Fender Champ. But anyway, so I did that, and Zonder goes, well, what's that sound, that swirly sound? I said, well, that's the Leslie. And he goes, well, can you do it without the Leslie? Do stuff without the Leslie. So I have I use my Marshall and a Celestion bottom, and I put it through that. And I do that a lot. I use that anyway. And so I was just playing straight B3 through a Marshall and a Celestion with a 57 on it. And Zonder loved it. And I just had fun. I wasn't like, okay, I'm going to make this way or that way. I just was, and he said, just have fun, just go for it. So that's kind of what I did. And the more I did, the more he asked of me. He would say, well, can you do this? Oh man, that'd be cool. Can you do a mini moog part here? Or whatever. And I was using mellotrons and stuff, and he's not totally familiar with a mellotron, so he just said, yeah, that keyboard sound, that's cool. Do that at the out chorus, or whatever. But
right.
So he and I worked together a lot on that record. I mean, he had very good direction to me. He gave me great direction on that. So
yeah,
but thank you very much. I appreciate the compliment. That's for sure.
And again, it was one of those things where I picked up on that right away when I heard the first single, and I'm listening to the album. And then interestingly enough, I remember Mark came on my show. We started talking about that. And then like, I didn't read his Facebook post, but like, I guess like right before the interview, maybe a day before, he mentioned that. And then he mentioned it to me because I picked up on it right away. That was one of the things that for me set the second album out, set it apart from the first one. First one, it was very good, but this second A to Z album, I thought was just totally, it felt different. It felt like everybody had been playing it together as a band for like a decade. You know how that is. You play together. Where the first one was a little bit more, it felt like it was a little bit more constructed, whereas it felt more natural on the second album. It's probably my best way to describe that.
Well, and I think even though we hadn't been playing together for a decade, but the first record was done that way. It was a little bit more of a, put together project kind of vibe. And it was a great record. And those guys are great musicians, that keyboard player and guitar player, great players. I don't know them, but they're great players. And I thought that first record was really good. So, but again, I don't dwell on like, well, man, that first record was great. We got to do better than that. I just do what I do. And I hear a song and I'm like, well, okay, don't step on the vocal and have fun, kind of thing.
Yeah. And
Mark was saying, play anything you want, just play everywhere. But he loved that Hammond sound. So I went there, but yeah, even though we didn't play as a band, we all were dealing with each other during the record. And like a Philip Bino, that guy, he doesn't need to play with you for 10 albums to get the vibe. He had played with Mark for years. So the two of those guys, and live, it's like one person. It's like you'd swear that there's only one person playing the bass and the drums because they're so tight.
Yeah.
And it was that way on the record. But when we did the record, we cut a lot of the stuff. And then Mark goes, okay, so let's do it for real now. Everybody replay their parts to the real drums because he did drums and we played to that. But he says, okay, I've been listening. I'm going to do the drums again. And then let's play it all over again to my new drum tracks. And that made a huge difference because we were all into the music by then. Everybody was familiar with it and into it, and so by the time we did it again, which didn't take long because we'd already done it.
Right.
Mark replayed the drums and wow, everybody just locked right in. And it was great. Yeah, it was a lot of fun doing that record.
So you have a B3. Do you have any, do you own like a mini Moog? Do you have a lot of really cool instruments behind you? Any interesting, like, do you have any interesting instruments that, that you have, maybe some vintage stuff that would be interesting to talk about?
My most interesting thing vintage wise, two things. I have a Micro Moog.
Okay.
That was my first synthesizer in the band New England. That was my first synth foray into synths. And so that's a really interesting little thing. It's not complicated or anything like that, but the sound of that thing is punchy as shit.
Yeah.
And I use all the software stuff now, and I have to. That Micro Moog, I plugged it in the other day, and it's falling apart. I got to get it fixed. There's a guy here in Chicago who's going to
Sure.
kind of rebuild it for me. But that I love. And I have a Yamaha TX816.
Okay.
If you're familiar with that, that's like 8 DX7s in a rack.
Yep. I know what it is.
I bought that during the second Alcatrazz record,
Okay.
Disturbing the Peace. And I just fell in love with that. So when I moved to Chicago, I had that gone through. They replaced batteries, and the guy went through it completely, replaced the power cord on it and stuff because it'd been on the road. That to me is a really interesting piece of gear.
Yeah.
Nothing sounds like that. Nothing. I've got a lot of programs for some of the synths, the soft synths that I have, and the FM8, which is Native Instruments version of a DX7.
Sure.
And I've put 8 of those together and played them, but it's not that it just doesn't sound like the TX816. That thing's nasty.
Yeah.
It gets great.
And it's crazy when you talk about like vintage gear, like, you had the Mini Moog, you had the B3, and then like in the 80s, you moved to the Yamaha, you moved to the Fairlight, the CMI, you moved to a lot of those instruments that were kind of, and some of those, a Fairlight CMI was a lot of money for one of those things.
I didn't have a Fairlight.
Yeah.
I didn't. Later, after Alcatrazz, I got involved in a synclavier.
Okay.
So I had a synclavier room for about 2.5 years, and which almost made me switch to drinking and doing heroin. But those things that was a nightmare.
Oh, I'm
great
sure.
Instrument, but oh my God.
Yeah. 80s electronics. It's crazy how you can take old 80s electronics and refurbish it now with cheaper parts, and it's 10 times more reliable.
Oh yeah.
From any old synthesizer that came out back then, the old cars with the Star Wars dash, you could send a dash out and get it fixed for like $150, and it'll never wear out after that. But the 80s was different with that stuff, man. And all the old analog gear just kept rolling, and without all that stuff.
I don't have a Mini Moog anymore. I don't have my Prophet 5. I don't have my ARP Quadra, my Chroma. I don't have any of that. All I've got analog wise is my TX816 and that Micro Moog and a DX7 that I bought in Japan the first Alcatrazz tour, and I still have that. And that's been gone through. I had a couple of broken keys, and they fixed that. But everything I do, like that A to Z record, the B3 was live. That was the real B3, but everything else was soft synths, was Mini Moogs, and a lot of Mini Moog on that record, Mellotrons and stuff. And I have I played Mellotrons live for years, so I know what a Mellotron sounds like. So when I got software, there's a million programs in some of the companies that make the Mellotrons, and I immediately just stripped them down and got it as raw as possible. And it's okay, what's this thing really sound like? And it's shocking how close it is to a real they really sound like a real Mellotron. So I still use that a lot, and I use the Mellotron. I layer it with like live. I use a program called Mainstage, if you're familiar with that.
Mm-hmm. I've never heard the program. No.
Well, it's by Logic or Apple, and it's basically you can use any soft synth, any plugin in the world with it, and you just need controllers. So that's what I use because I can't fly. I can't carry real gear. I can't carry a Mini Moog. That's a Mini Moog in a case would be $200 to fly anywhere.
Oh yeah.
So I have a different rig. It's a flying rig, and I don't rent keyboards where I'm going or anything. I have to have my gear. So Mainstage is in my Mac, and so I've got the same sounds, same keyboards every night. It sounds the same to me. I use in-ears.
Right.
So, and that is huge. I can't tell you. I've been doing that for about 9 years, been using that. And I've tweaked the Moogs. I don't expect the Moog to sound exactly like a Moog, like my mini Moog used to sound. I don't really expect that out of it.
Yeah.
So I'm not always disappointed, but well, you know, I get what sounds good to me, and that's all I care about. So, but I'm used to using all that stuff now, and I use it all live. And the Hammond that I use live is the Logic Hammond in main stage, and it just that is the best to me, the best sounding Leslie and simulation that's out there.
Sure.
And I use a lot of distortion with it, so by the time I'm done with it, it's pretty raunchy.
So let's go back a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the early days of Alcatrazz, because you had some musicians in that band that either came from some pretty prominent bands, say like Graham Bonnet, for example, being in Rainbow, and you had an album with Yngwie Malmsteen and Steve Vai. So you had these guys that really went on to do some pretty great things, or had done some great stuff. And when you go back to the era of the band, what's interesting is I went back and listened to those first 3 albums that you did, and it was like a lot of these guys were like one and done. But it's got to be interesting playing with Malmsteen in like his very early days, and even Steve Vai.
Yeah, Yngwie, it was easy. You know, Yngwie's got a bad reputation. You know, a lot of people talk shit about him and hard to work with and all that. All I know is when he came in, he was 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And the only problems we had with him, for the most part, were just at rehearsals. He would 2 Marshall stacks on 10, and he just wouldn't stop playing. And I'd have to walk over to him and go, Yngwie, we need to work on the arrangement. He'd go, oh, yeah, man. And then he'd be okay, we'd work. And then if there was a lull in the action, he'd start playing again.
Yeah.
So he just couldn't help himself, you know, that way. But
yeah,
other than that, writing songs was easy. We wrote all the songs on that record. It was a no-brainer. It was really pretty easy. And we'd finish the music, give it to Graham, and Graham would do the lyrics and melody. It moved really quickly.
Yeah.
And we cut it almost live down at Rockshire Records. They had their own studio. So it was right next to the rehearsal place. And that was our record company. So they were there all the time. And it was all like, it was pretty straight ahead and easy. We set up in the studio. Because it was their studio, we just set up and we didn't have to worry about anybody coming in, or there was no clock running. So we set up in there and just played.
Yeah.
And then Dennis McKay started recording.
So
we went back and fixed things and replaced things, but a lot of that was live.
Yeah. So I have to ask you, there's this old wives' tale that Yngwie said you'd have to pay him $1 million to play on a new record. Is that true? Did that really happen?
To play on a new record now?
Yeah.
I think, I don't know anything about him. I'll tell you where the $1 million came from. We were going to do a tour in Japan with the Graham Bonnet Band.
Okay.
And then I don't know who came up with the idea. I think it was the record company in Japan, who was Yngwie's record company. And they said, why don't you have Yngwie play on 5 or 6 songs live? And we were like, yeah, no problem. And I said, I don't think you're going to get him to do it. I don't think he'll ever do it. And the record company, the president of the label, was very arrogant about it. He says, oh, I can get him to do anything. Don't worry about that. And I said, I'm telling you, Yngwie's not going to do this. And I wish he would have. I would have loved to have done it. It would have been that would have been a blast. But anyway, the record company went after it. And then he came back very sheepishly and said, yeah, he doesn't want to do it. He can't do it. And I said, yeah, you know. So then it came out, he asked for $1 million. And I've talked to people about that, and I won't mention any names, but they said, you know what, that's his manager asking for $1 million.
Okay.
If you would have gone direct to Yngwie somehow and just said, "Hey, how about 200 grand?" It would have been no problem. But I think she's a bit unrealistic, and that was a bit unrealistic. So even the label in Japan had a lot of money. This guy's a mega rich guy, and he said, "Yeah, I can't do that."
Well, the Japanese fan base is for this kind of music has always been, in my opinion,
Yeah.
the most consistent. I just did a whole episode on this, and when you want to talk about the style of music that you play, you've played for most of your career as a musician. I mean, the Japanese fan base through thick and thin. I mean, they've always been the most consistent for this kind of music.
Yeah, they're pretty what's the word? They're fanatics. They really are fanatics. Not only do they want to know, what kind of car you drive and where you buy your clothes, but musically, they get inside it. They want to know everything. You're over there doing interviews, and they ask very different questions than people here would ask. Not necessarily better by any means, but some of them are kind of strange. But yeah, they're fanatics about their music. That's for sure. Especially this kind of music. Our first tour was kind of surreal. I didn't realize how big the band was over there. When we got to the airport, there were a couple of hundred kids there with signs and pictures of us and stuff. And I had never seen anything like that in my life. I'd never experienced anything like that. And then get to the hotel, and the fans are all around the windows of the hotel trying to get in, and it was crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've seen signing sessions for bands, and these people are showing up to get their stuff signed, like you do, like an in-store, like a record in-store, and they're bringing people gifts. Like they're making stuff for you. They're making like origami for you. I mean,
I still have some from the first tour. Yeah. They gave me, my publishing company was called Godzilla Music.
Okay.
Because I just liked that first Godzilla movie with Raymond Burr, and I love that movie. So they found out about that. I didn't say anything in interviews about it. I just named my publishing company Godzilla Music. When I got to Japan, everybody was giving me presents, Godzilla presents. I got a sake set, a Godzilla sake set. They gave me some little Godzilla little toys that you run on the table and it spits sparks and stuff like that. I went to a toy store in Tokyo, and I went by myself to buy some presents for people. And I got up to this one floor, and that's where the Godzilla stuff was. And the people on that floor were showing me, they knew. I don't know how they knew. I didn't plan that. There was no announcement that I was going, but that's a fanatic thing. They had found out somehow that I was going to be at that store. And they were all ready with all the Godzilla stuff. So I bought a bunch of Godzilla stuff.
I'm laughing just because this is literally, it's such a different group of people over there.
Oh, yeah.
Even during, you talk to a lot of people that played in a lot of hard rock and heavy metal bands. And even when like you had the dark ages of the 1990s, the Japanese fan base was just still there.
Yes.
You went from like, nobody caring about you or nobody knowing your name here in the States. You go fly over there, you're like an A-list celebrity. I mean, that's how different it is.
I did a record in the 90s called Blackthorn with Bob Kulick and Chuck Wright and Frankie Manelli from Quiet Riot, and we did this record, great record. Graham sang, and it was a great record. And of course, we timed it exactly wrong, and the record in the States did absolutely less than nothing. But there was interest from Sony Publishing, and there was interest from our label, Polydor, I guess it was. Anyway, and they wanted us to come over.
Yeah.
And they said, well, you and Graham and Bob come over and do press. And then we'll do a tour. So they flew us over, and we did press, and the record was dead here in the States. So I just thought, well, it's nice we're going to Japan, but I mean, really, we got there, it was like we were rocking. They loved that record over there, and they were all bummed that we weren't touring yet. So, Yeah, it's a whole different world. Yeah, they knew every song, every note on the record. I mean,
Yeah.
the record in the States, nobody knew anything. It was just completely dead. Came out of the box dead because that wasn't in fashion. The grunge thing had hit and we were done. We weren't going to do anything at that point.
Yeah, you brought up Quiet Riot. You played on one of their albums, and a
Yes.
very interesting album in their discography because it obviously did not feature like Kevin DuBrow.
No.
Paul Shortino sang on it, and it's an interesting record. When we were setting up this interview, I'm like, I'm gonna go revisit that album just to check that out because I heard it years and years ago
Right.
when I was. So this show started out as a radio show, and I remember many years ago finding, in the record library, they had that album. It had a 12-inch version of it, and usually, and this is no disrespect to what you did there, but usually the better shape the album was in, the less somebody played it, right? Things like 25 years old, 30 years old at the time.
Yeah.
But I went and listened to it, and it's an interesting album because it's so different to me than what they had done before.
Oh, which I disagreed with. I mean, I agree. When I saw Paul Shortino and I wrote most of it, and as we're writing, I'm doing keyboard parts that I thought it was song, it was stuff to get the song out.
Yeah.
I wasn't playing keyboard parts thinking that's going to be my brilliant keyboard part on the record. I was writing songs, and that ended up being Spencer Proffer, the producer, loved what I played, which is nice, and that's what ended up being on the record. So in my opinion, way too many keyboards and not enough just big crunch, 3-piece Quiet Riot.
Yeah.
So that's coming from a keyboard player. I heard the mixes and I was bummed because I thought the band, I wasn't a member of the band. I was a hired hand.
Sure.
But I just thought, God, we could kill if these guys had done just a traditional Quiet Riot record. So they had some great songs, and there were some songs that didn't make it on the record that were very atypical Quiet Riot, Come On Feel the Noise. And I thought that's what we should have done, but I wasn't in the position to say anything, but too many keyboards.
Yeah.
And the guys in the band loved it. I mean, Frankie loved the keyboards, and they're mixing, and Carlos and Frank are like, oh yeah, turn up this, turn up that. And I was just sitting in the control room just thinking, wow, this is surreal. This is bizarre. So I thought it should have been more of what they were doing? They were chasing the White Snake thing.
Sure.
White Snake had just come off their big
1987.
Yeah, a big hit, and which was a lot of keyboards anyway. So they were kind of chasing that a bit. And I just thought it should have been Quiet Riot. And funny, the single off the record, I wrote that piece of music, and I was just at rehearsal one day playing it, and I wasn't really thinking. We were doing pre-production with Spencer Proffer, and I was just playing it it's a nasty organ thing, really nasty organ thing, which was a ripoff of Spooky Tooth. But anyway, I was playing it, and Spencer Proffer heard that. He goes, that's great. That's great.
The single you're referring to, is it Stay With Me Tonight?
Yes.
Okay, that was the single. Okay.
Yeah, and I'd written that 6 months before, and I was just at rehearsal, just set up, and I was just playing. And Spencer goes, I love that. And Carlos came over and just starts jamming to it. And he was very spontaneous, and Spencer goes, that's great, guys, we're going to do this. Just like that. And I was like, but it's a keyboard. It starts with this grinding organ thing, and it was like, okay. And the way it went. So it's just, that whole album was a surprise to me. But I love working with those guys. Frankie and I became very good friends. And God bless him. And Carlos, we just had a great time.
Yeah.
I love touring with him. And
yeah, the album, I'll be honest with you, when I remember listening to it, many years ago. I was probably 19 or 20 years old, and I was kind of like, I really wasn't into it, but I found it kind of intriguing listening to it yesterday because, you don't listen to something for a long time. You get older, you start thinking to yourself, okay, I haven't heard this album in 25 years. Let me go and revisit it. And I'll be honest with you, I think it's a lot better than people give it credit for. Just to be fair.
Well,
I think
that's what Giles says.
Yeah. I mean, even if it maybe would have done better if it had a different band name, possibly. Because you always hear people that start off doing a solo album and then the record label pressures them to put it under their band name. Like the Seventh Star album by Black Sabbath would be a great example of that. And the record is good, but then it gets backlash because they put the Black Sabbath name on it. And so I look at that Quiet Riot album, and I think the same way. I think musically, it's actually pretty good. But you get people that'll slag it because it sounds so different. It's got a different singer. It's musically a lot different. And I think nowadays you don't see as much backlash over, doing something a little different than you did back then.
No, you're right. Paul and I wrote tons of songs together. We were on a roll. We were just writing all the time because he lived close to me. And so he was at my studio every day. We're just writing songs. And then the Quiet Riot thing happened, and Paul got me involved in that. And we had all these songs, and then we just continued writing for that. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I wasn't thinking it was going to sound like we were writing. And when we went into, I set up my keyboards in the studio, and Spencer goes, "Do exactly what you did on the demos." Mm-hmm. I was like, "But do exactly what you did." And Carlos loved it. Here's a guitar player telling me, "Yeah, that keyboard part. Oh man, we got to have that. That's great. That's great." And he would find his way around it and play with it, Mm-hmm. So it was fun doing the record. And it was great in the studio, and Paul sang his ass off. So it was all good. It just wasn't, to me, it still wasn't really Quiet Riot. Like,
yeah, I think
I love the Slade. I love Slade. So
yeah, sure.
Quiet Riot came out. I was like, yes,
I think Paul Schwartino's a phenomenal vocalist. I always loved his voice quite a bit, actually.
Yes, I do too.
So,
great singer.
Couple more questions for you. So obviously there was, I don't know if it was a lawsuit or there was a feud over the Alcatrazz name. Some people, of course you're always going to have the people, oh no, Graham Bonnet, no Alcatrazz, you're going to have that crowd. But, you guys own the name for it, correct? I mean, there was a little bit about
I own the name.
Okay.
Worldwide. Papers. Lawyers, papers. I own the name.
Okay. So, so you actually own the band name, because I remember reading Facebook posts, oh, they stole the band name, and it's like, all that crazy stuff. So that's all resolved then. There's no.
Yes, it's resolved because there's nothing else to talk about. And, it's funny when we first got into it, this back and forth about the name, I registered the name for two reasons. One, because we'd split with Graham.
Yeah.
And I didn't want him to use it. I wanted to use it.
Yeah.
And then second of all, a lot of bands don't think about this, but if you don't register a name, then your band can use it. And now it doesn't mean you're going to be as good as Alcatrazz or whatever, but it's going to confuse the hell out of people. So now there's an Alcatrazz in Europe, there's another one over here, another one over there. So I thought, and my lawyer said, he says, you should register this name, which had nothing to do with Graham being gone. Or he said, you should register this name.
Yeah.
Because he said, he quoted problems that he'd had with bands that freaking out because somebody started using the name.
Sure.
So that had a lot to do with it. I wanted to make it clean. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did.
Completely understandable. One of the things I think that's been great for you guys, and I've really been quite a fan of this, is the way that Brave Words Records has done things since bringing bands on board. And you've been on a lot of record labels. You've worked with a lot of people in the industry for the past, plus decades. How do you view Brave Words Records? Like, what is it about that label that really made you want to say, you know what, I want to work with these guys? You know, and I know Giles works for him, but there's obviously a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, it's Brian Adams. Brian, I've known Brian for years, and just I knew him casually. You know, I wasn't involved with him in a business sense before, but I knew what a fan he was. He's like the real deal. He loves the music, and the people that are around him are like that. They're like Michael is that way. Michael loves this music, the press guy, and that to me, that's the whole thing right there. I don't want to be on a label that's not into what we're doing, that are just into it for whatever reason, you know. And Silver Lining was great, and the great people. I love them. But our time was up with them. I mean, the deal was up, and it was time to move on. You know, we hadn't cracked the Billboard top 10 with them, and we weren't, of course, we wished we'd had, and I know Silver Lining did from a financial point. But Brave Words just jumped right in. I mean, Brian was like, let's go, let's do this. And there was never a hesitation. And that was a thrill for me, a label that really wanted you, that was like, yeah, let's do this. Yeah. And it wasn't about the money. They didn't throw a bunch of money at us. There's no bunch of money to be thrown at anybody anymore.
No, not at all. Industry's definitely changed.
It wasn't about that. And you don't really make money selling records anymore. I mean, you make money touring. And you make a record to advertise your tour, basically, to let people know you're live, and hopefully they like the music, and then they go, wow, we want to go see those guys, you know, kind of thing. But with Spotify, I mean, I get statements at Spotify, I can't even read it. I don't even know what that 0.00.12.0, I don't even know what that means. You know what I mean? It's so, let's have to forget about that. It is what it is. People fight over publishing, and I had a friend of mine, and I won't mention his name or what band, but he was all uptight about the publishing. It wasn't split the way he wanted it split. And I said, you guys are arguing about nothing, because there is no money to be made. So what you're arguing about is ego, about like, well, I wrote, you know, the chorus in that song, and I'm not getting I should get 30% or whatever. Right. And so in my opinion, if I was doing a solo record, it would just say written by the band, you know. And Giles and I and Joe write the music, but we don't argue about splits. It's just like we just split it up. Giles doesn't say, well, I'm the singer and I wrote the lyrics and the melody, so 50%, you know. Yeah. Do that. It's not old school like that. It's new school. Yeah. It's like all for one for all kind of attitude, basically.
Right. It's kind of like the way the industry is set up today. It's like you make the record now to promote the tour, where before you had the tour to promote the record. It was kind of like the script is flipped.
Yes. Because I mean, I remember in the band New England being out on the road with Kiss, or we toured with Styx in Kansas and all that stuff. And I remember talking to Tommy Shaw and Jay and Styx, and those guys, they were killing on the road. I mean, they were printing money on the road, but they were also printing money with their record sales, because they were selling big record sales.
Sure.
I mean, major records all over the world. And a lot of people didn't think about that in the United States, but it all adds up. That in those days, you know, nobody thought about Germany or whatever, but yeah, and they said it. They said, "Oh, well, you know, got a record coming out. You got a record coming out. That'll be great. But man, we got this big tour that's going to really boost our record sales. That's really going to boost our record sales."
Yep.
And now I suppose it does. It boosts people wanting to hear. They go, wow, I saw those guys last night, man. Let's go check them out. Go to Spotify or whatever and download or stream, whatever, and listen. But it's definitely changed.
Yeah, wow. It definitely has. The interesting thing about the Brave Words, you mentioned, you know, Michael, for example, the industry, it definitely changed, and you have to change with the way you promote music and promote artists and promote any kind of creative. And I think that, we did a whole show on the label here, and we talked about thinking outside of the box. And there's a lot of things that those guys do that, you probably won't have a lot of record labels do. I can tell you for a fact, you don't have a lot of record labels do some of these things, but it's like anything you have going on, they will promote it for you.
Yes.
A lot of labels won't do that. A lot of publicists definitely won't do that. And there's a lot of weird, interesting out of the box things that, Michael is willing to try or has done, and they've been effective. And
yes,
he's not afraid to try anything. And some people, I can flat out attest to this, that when people, some of these publicists are still doing things the old way, get paid a ridiculous amount of money, then send everything out to your mailing list 5 or 6 times, and that's pretty much what they do. If they set an interview up, they set up an interview. But generally speaking, there's nothing else done with most of these guys. Yeah,
I call it the 2-week thing.
Yeah,
your record comes
album,
out,
right?
2
your
weeks
album,
it's done.
Yeah, your album doesn't exist after the release date. It's how it is. But
it's sort of gotten that way. Yeah. I don't even know why. I mean, because they know going in, they're not going to make a bundle of money. So they know that it's going to be it's got to be a bit of a long haul. But yeah, it's 2 weeks and the press stops. And that's always bothered me. And I do understand it from a business standpoint, where they've got other bands, and they've got to service the other bands and stuff. But it's disappointing. Whereas Michael, I just get these emails. Here's an interview. Here's an interview. Here's another interview. Another interview, and they're all good. The people that I've done this with, there's not one that I'd say, "Oh boy, that was some guy in his living room, that doesn't know what he's doing." Not one. I'd say 99% of the time, these people really know the history of the band for real. And I can tell if somebody, or if they're reading off cue cards going, so your album came out in, and he knows good people because he's been in the business so long.
Right.
And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. He has a really great setup to set those interviews up, number one. And then, the thing is, when you talk about using key cards, I have never once had a script for the show in close to 30 years. I just don't need one. It's one of those things. And it's interesting because, when I think of Alcatrazz, I remember I started this show in the late 90s. So I remember going back, I was a kid, I was going back into the record library, and I discovered, actually, weirdly enough, the third Alcatrazz album was the first one I actually listened to.
Oh, that's bizarre.
Because I didn't know who the band was. I'm like, I just knew Steve Vai and Yngwie played in it, so I pulled that record out, and I would go, we used to do these like public service shows, and I used to have to play one of those for about an hour.
Right.
So what I would do is I'd grab 3 or 4 albums. I'd go to the production room while that show was airing over the radio, and I'd go right into the room next door, and I would check records out. And I remember hearing that album, and then I remember hearing, the second album I probably like the best of the old stuff, because I've always considered Alcatrazz to be like a tale of 2 eras, right? You have the new stuff and you have the old stuff,
right?
And I always get a lot of flack because I never have been somebody who has always been stuck on 1 or 2 albums. Like, you'll see these press releases, like someone will put an album out. Oh, it's the best album since this record came out. It could be anything, right? It could be any band. It could be like, I'll give you an example. Like, people will say stuff like, oh, it's Metallica's best album since the Black Album, or since, Ride the Lightning, or something like that, because people get hooked on these records. But I'll be honest with you, as you get older and as you evolve, you get better at what you're doing. You become better songwriters. And I think there's a lot of bands, I think even in the case of you guys, I just think that a lot of bands that have been around as long as you, yourself included, I think some of these new albums, I think in many cases I like better than the old stuff. And even some of the re-recordings, I mentioned this, I actually reviewed Island in the Sun, and I just like the re-recorded one better than the original. Just my opinion, but I'm not afraid to say those things. Now,
And that's fine. And
Yeah.
I don't take offense to it. I'm flattered. That first record, just being totally honest, didn't sound good. It wasn't produced well. The people that did it and the way it was done, the band performed. We played. Right. We did our job. But oh my God, it was, in my opinion, it was a terrible sounding record. And it didn't seem to matter too much because people liked what was on there, and Yngwie and everybody did a great job, and they liked the record. They liked the songs. So,
sure.
And I've heard records over the years that I didn't think sounded good at all, but the songs were good. And that carried it. That carried the day. That was like, who cares what it sounds like? The songs are good. I mean, Iron Maiden, some of their records, and they didn't care about, they weren't hung up on sounding, like the newest, latest, greatest Pro Tools band, I call them. They're very raw, And if you put on, there's certain Iron Maiden records, you put them on next to another band of the same time period, and it doesn't sound as good sonically.
Yeah.
I mean, it's recorded well and all that. It's not that. It's just it doesn't have that same over-the-top glaze over it, that a lot of records have, with the perfect drum sound, the perfect samples they've triggered, and 15 layers of keyboards and 50 guitar tracks. Mm-hmm. That everybody went through that period, whereas there's not enough guitar, can't be enough doubles and triples and quadruples of the guitar and stuff. Right.
Yeah. And in many ways, though, the way a lot of those recordings sound, I couldn't imagine some of them any different. You brought up Iron Maiden, and it's interesting because I do these things called retro reviews. And I remember, I don't know what it was. People have been emailing me to do this. I had a whole bunch of people asking me, what do you think of Peace of Mind by Iron Maiden? And I thought to myself, you know what? That sounds like a great record to start off with. And, sonically, is it the best recording compared to some of these modern ones? Well, it's really a matter, like music, it's a matter of, it's subjective, because I could not imagine them making that album again with modern equipment. I think it loses something in a sense. And so you have all these fantastic, emulators, and you have equipment, you could do everything in essentially with a box that you needed thousands of millions of dollars worth of equipment for. But I think sometimes these modern recordings, and keep in mind, I always talk about this, I get probably like 1,000 emails a week, and I have so many of these bands, whether it's a label, a publicist, bands I've never heard of, and you listen to them, and it's like, man, half these people use the same default settings that a lot of these plugins have. And
absolutely.
And it sounds like garbage. And so, in the old days, you really couldn't afford to make mistakes.
No.
Like now you make a mistake, I'm going to just go delete it and cut it out. But, you can only splice a tape back in the day for so long, so many times, right? You get the little blue tape and you put it on there to splice the tape,
all my early records, it had to be done. It had to be played correctly.
Yep.
And you can cut tape. I mean, Mike Stone, I worked with Mike Stone in the band New England. He did 2 records with us, who did all the Queen records. He was the engineer on all the Queen records of Roy Baker.
Yep.
And Michael talked about the edits they did. Edited a million edits on a drum track. Not because Roger Taylor wasn't a great drummer, because he is. It was because they would, let's put that drum fill over here. Let's extend that chorus.
Yeah, I got you.
Oh, let's get rid of those mistakes. Oh my God, it wasn't that. So there was some cutting and chopping going on, but nothing like people do now.
No,
oh my God,
not at all.
And I'm guilty. I don't have to do it on our records, but I've produced some people nobody you'd ever heard of, and worked with a lot of artists where I'll just be an engineer, just record somebody, and oh my God, I've got to chop it and time correct everything and pitch correct everything. And that to them is the norm. That's what they're a little bit younger, and that's what they think. Well, that's what we do, right? That's what you do. I go, no, you rehearse and get it right. Well, we can't rehearse. And I've gotten this several times. The band will tell me, I said, you guys need to rehearse. And they go, well, how much did you rehearse in Alcatrazz? I said, 5-6 days a week.
Yeah.
All day. You know, we beat that stuff to death. And in New England, the same thing. We killed ourselves getting those songs right and being able to play them right. These new bands go, well, but I work, man. I work at Kmart during the, Walmart, that I have to go to work there. And then I'm home and I have to drive 30 miles over here. I said, well, then you're never going to make it. You have to find a way to put more time into the music and quit worrying about working. Because at some point, that's what we did. You step off the dock. You go, well, it ain't going to happen if I keep working at Walmart. So I got to dedicate this to the music and find a way to pay the bills.
Well,
like I drove a taxi at night.
Well, where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Yeah.
I work a normal job like a lot of people do. I find a way to do the production for the show. I find a way to put this show on, and I juggle a lot of things around. But if you really want it to happen, you're going to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how bad you want it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's how, and is it something like this is an outlet for me? So this is more or less like I do this as my main outlet now.
Right.
And so I get excited. I don't care if I work 10, 12 hours. I get excited to come and do this.
Right.
And you have to, and when it comes to music, you have to have that like excitement level to really get into it.
Yeah. I get young bands that ask me that they'll say, oh, well, this is going to be cool. So we'll release this. And then, I've had a guy actually ask me, so how long does it take to make it? And I go, well, I haven't made it, so I don't know. Oh yeah, but you've been on MTV and I said, well, that doesn't mean you made it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I don't know what making it is. I don't know. I just play music. I like doing it. And I hope it's popular enough that I can play bigger places or more places or whatever.
Right.
And they go, yeah, well, I'm going to do this and do that, and I go, what I tell them is you get into music because you love it. You can't live without it. It's like a woman. You got to have that person. I can't live without her.
Yeah.
Once you get in, then you figure out how to make money with it. But don't get in it for the money.
Mm-hmm.
Big mistake, and so a lot of people do. They don't do it because they love it. They get into it. They don't love it when they get into it. They do it because they think, oh, well, I'm going to be famous and and none of that means anything.
No, I gotcha. One other question for you. Steve Vai was in the band for an album. What was he like to work with, especially in the early days? His earlier days, actually.
Yeah. He was great. He was feeling his way through. He'd never been in a band like that. I mean, he played with Zappa, but that's not like a band. So this was the first, I think, band that he'd been in. So it was established early on, he's going to write everything.
Okay.
And that's just the way it was. So I worked with him a lot, putting the songs together. We'd get together in the mornings before rehearsal, and we'd talk about it, talk about a song and direction and stuff. But I had fun working with Steve. And as a keyboard player, it was good for me. It really pulled me up. He's a much better musician than I am. So he was expecting things out of me that I couldn't do. But I had to figure it out and practice until I got it to get those parts for the record. So it was great for me, and I loved working. I loved that, and nice guy. So he wasn't being a jerk about it. He was just like, this is what he's hearing in his head. Can you do this? And I go, oh man, I don't know. That's a tough one. He goes, well, boy, really cool if you can play it this way or that way. And so I went for it. So I loved working with the guy. Mm-hmm. But it was obvious to me pretty early on that he was going to move on, that he was going to,
right.
He needed to be Steve Vai. I was a little surprised actually that the David Lee Roth gig, I certainly didn't, when he told me, he says, I'm leaving, I'm going to join David Lee Roth. I totally understood. That's just like,
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But I was a little surprised because I thought for sure he would say, I'm leaving because I'm going to do my own solo thing. And I've got this guy I'm playing with, and I'm going to do this, and we're going to make a record, but it's going to be the Steve Vai band, what he is now.
Yeah.
And then when he did the White Snake thing, I thought, okay, so he's making money. You play, people want you, you play and you make money. Okay, fair enough. But I think he always back then, he knew what he was going to do. He knew that was all a means to an end to do what he's doing now, which is, being Steve Vai. So, but yeah, he's great to work with. And I'm really super proud of that record. That's one of my favorite records that I've ever been involved with or made. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's like I said, of the old stuff. That's my favorite of those three albums, especially. So, a couple more questions. The upcoming album you guys are writing, not the one coming out in November, but the next studio album.
Right.
How would you probably compare some of that? Because Giles is in the writing process. How would you compare a lot of those songs to, say, some of the last couple records you've done? Now, Giles grew up on the band. He grew up on a lot of great bands, which we've talked about with each other, over the last couple years. But you guys are writing this record with a new person, and I'm just curious how you would compare some of those songs to, say, the last couple records.
Some of the songs have a similar feel and direction to them. But we certainly were stretching. We're experimenting with sounds and grooves and stuff. How it compares to the last couple of records, a lot of it in the end will be similar because it's Joe Stump playing.
Sure.
So it's going to have that guitar thing, that similarity to it, and I'm playing. So you're going to hear that. It's going to be familiar to you, and Giles is delivering the goods. So you'll hear influences of No Parole from Rock and Roll. Not really any influences off that Disturbing the Peace record. I love that record, but that's such a Steve Vai thing. And that doesn't seep into what we're doing now.
No, I got you. Yep.
So it'll be more you'll hear stuff that'll sound you'll hear the No Parole influence, and you'll hear just Giles and I and Joe writing and what that sounds like today,
Yeah. The vibe I've always had from Giles is that he respects what the band has done in the past because he was a fan. I think I think a great example of that would be the Jack Starr album he sang on.
Right.
That when I listen to that record, you can just tell that he grew up on this music. So he has like this respect. He has a respect level for a lot of these artists and what they've done.
Yeah.
And he really wants to pay homage to that. I think he did a great job of that in Warlord. And getting Bill's music on there.
Yeah.
And I think he did the same thing with the Jack Starr album, the Out of the Darkness Part 2. So I'm thinking at this Alcatrazz album, you're going to have a little bit of that.
Yes. Giles is a huge fan of the band back in the day. It's not like there's this guy playing with us that was a fan. I don't think of that way. I mean, he is and he was, but when he sings and writes, he's not thinking of what Alcatrazz used to be or what I got to do. I've got to be like Graham or, he's Giles. So it'll sound like exactly who we are today.
Right.
Not like Giles trying to sound like somebody from 30 years ago, whatever. And Graham's one of his favorite singers, as he is mine today. So, but Giles is being Giles. And when we write together, we don't think about it. I don't think about what's Giles going to write here and what's he going to do? It just happens. It's real natural and it just happens. And I love what he does. I love what he's writing. And Joe and I and Giles are all on the same page about this. So it just feels good, but it's funny when I think about it, if I stop and think, like there was this kid in New Zealand that was a fan of these records, and he like the Blackthorn record that I was talking about. Giles says he rode his bike, I don't know, 10 miles or something to buy that record when it came out. He was anxiously waiting on that record, and he rode to this record store to buy it. And on his bike. I thought that was funny.
I did that a lot as a kid, going up the music store.
I did too.
Yeah.
I did too.
When I was 15, 16, riding my little BMX bike to the music store, scrounging enough allowance money to pay the $12.99 for the CD.
Right.
Yeah.
There weren't even CDs, and this is showing my age. There weren't CDs when I rode my bike we lived in Ohio. I'd grown up in Huntington, West Virginia. We moved over into Ohio.
Okay.
But I kept going back to Huntington. I had friends in Huntington. And so as a kid, I'd get on my bike and ride the 10 miles back across the Ohio River to Huntington. And my record store was there. So I would ride over there. And I remember buying a Hollies record, a single.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I always called the store. Is that, do you have that? Do you have that? Do you have that?
Yeah.
And I rode over and bought that Hollies single. And
my favorite song by the Hollies was always Bus Stop.
Oh my God. Oh.
There's a jukebox downstairs that plays 45s. I have that song in there, actually.
Oh my God. That's my dream, is to have a jukebox with all those songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived in New York for a while, lived with a girl that worked for Phil Ramone, who produced Billy Joel and stuff. And one day Michelle says to me, "Come on downtown with me. We're going to Bleecker Bob's in the city, down in the village." And he sold vintage records. I mean, thousands of vintage records. Billy Joel wanted a jukebox, so he sent Michelle on this mission to buy this whole list of those records. And that was so much fun.
Yeah.
Like I'm watching her buy this stuff and like, oh man, I wish I had, I remember that song. I mean, everything from Hollies to Temptations to, Elvis to Buddy Holly to whatever. Billy Joel was living the dream, putting that together for his jukebox.
Yeah.
It was the coolest thing.
I go through those streaks where I listen to music from the 50s and the 60s. So, it's funny you bring them up, because I was just listening to them last week. Actually, I was listening to all these 60s bands, the Animals, the Hollies, even some of the Beatles, so I get into that kind of music, actually. So it's funny you brought that song up, because I was just listening to that song Friday, bringing them up. I was just listening to Bus Stop on Friday.
Right.
So anyhow, one last question for you. Any last words for any people that follow the band or follow you, for anybody watching this interview?
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate, tell the fans how much I appreciate them being loyal and following the band. Mm-hmm. And I really hope they can come see us live. I know it's tough because we play in Europe mostly. Hopefully we'll do a U.S. tour. We did a U.S. tour, but we'll do another one and they can come see us. But I just really appreciate them supporting us by buying the music and listening to the music and getting into what we're doing. That's why we do it. Don't really do it for me. I do it. I love playing it and I love writing it, but you hope that people out there are listening and love it. So thank you.
Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching. And if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.